Alrighty, welcome to episode 287 of Backpacking America. I am here with Shihan Allie from LI Ninjitsu Centers of East Islip, and I'm very excited to be here. He practices in Ninjitsu.
Right.
If you guys remember Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but like in real life. So tell us a little bit about what is Ninjitsu?
Well, it depends on how old you are, right? You'll go back to the 80s and maybe early 90s, like with all these really great ninja movies, Revenge of the Ninja, everything is ninja related these days. But ninjitsu is a Japanese martial art. And, historically, it started, 1,000 years ago, depending on the family line, which is called Ruha. And it's kind of made its way from India to Japan. And it was the kind of like the anti-samurai, right? The ninja were they were actually exiled from society, and they ran off into the mountains to try to live their lives and separate from the law of the samurai and the shogun and all that other stuff. And they were highly trained warriors in espionage and poisons and everything you could possibly think of, climbing and disappearing, and all the things that they could use at their will to be able to manipulate what people saw and felt, like folk law. And, they would climb up walls, but they used ninja claws. They made claws out of steel, and they were fastened to their hands, and they could use them for gripping. They were experts at holding their breath or using bamboo as like a snorkel to be able to hide in the water. And, they were hired by a lot of the samurai to assassinate other samurai or lords. So that's how they got their name. I remember wanting to be that ninja guy, when I was younger, being able to do all those amazing things.
So why did they not want to live the life of the samurai?
It was too much against the, and again, I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly. However, historically, their philosophies clashed. Like the samurai were one specific way. It was that you ruled by law, a certain way that they lived, a certain code of ethics and standards that they lived by. And I believe that a lot of people didn't agree with that. And a lot of the ninja, the martial artists that do ninjitsu, they would, fight against it to try to overturn it. And they eventually ended up just trying to stay away from it.
Wow.
However, though, in history, they were hired by a lot of the samurai. So it's better to hire your enemy rather than have them attack you. Yeah. So they would hire them as protectors, and they would, be there for whatever ruling lord, and they'd hire out different clans of the ninja to do their espionage and, intelligence gathering or assassinations in the evenings and late nights and, while people are sleeping and so on and so forth.
Wow. So how long have you been practicing this martial art?
Well, I've been practicing martial arts since I'm 3.5-ish. My mom and dad put me in the martial arts. Obviously, I don't remember much about it. I was very, very young, and I trained in a style called Jerome Mackey. It was probably the first of the franchise martial arts schools that were out there back in 1969-ish.
Wow.
And my dad was a police officer at the time, and he felt like it was during the 70s, that era where cops were kind of like now, they were looked on differently. People didn't like them. People would make fun of them or, attack them and so on. Similar to what we're really going through. It's like a resurgence of that attitude now, which I'm so highly against. But my dad wanted me to learn martial arts and self-defense and be able to defend myself. So my mom was small. He was about 5'10", so he assumed I would be around that height or smaller. So they put me in the martial arts, and I trained. And I was also very lucky to have a cousin who was very much into the martial arts, had a black belt in Aikido, a black belt in Mudokan Tang Sudo. He lived in Rockaway Beach. He would come out and teach me. And, when he was out for the weekend, he'd stay at our house Friday, Saturday, Sunday, go back home on Monday. Then as I became a teenager, he actually lived with me for quite some time in our home and taught me martial arts as well.
That's awesome. So it's always been a part of your life.
since I was born.
Since you
Like
were
all
born.
I know is martial arts. Like, you know, many people could say they did something for a long time. Me in particular, I've done this my entire life. That's all I've done. You know, I was in a rock and roll band, and
Cool.
yeah, I loved that and loved music, but it was girls, rock and roll, and martial arts.
That's awesome.
Those are my three things that I really enjoyed.
So, you know, when people become teenagers, they have like a shift where it's like, oh, do I want to do this? Like for me, I ice skated since I was in 4th grade.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I don't really want to do this. Became skateboarding. Turned into skateboarding. So how what made it like consistently stick for you?
Well,
throughout
first
these
off,
years?
I think early on, from whatever age, 3.5 to, you know, my early teens, it was just something that I did. You know, my parents brought me. I really didn't have a choice. Like, we didn't have discussions. Nowadays, it's, you know, society is a little bit softer. You know, we want to take our children's feelings into consideration. I think so much to the detriment of the child, right? You know, we want young kids to have the opportunity to make choices on their own, when the reality is that every single day we make choices for our children, right? We tell them what time to go to bed, when to take a bath, what to eat. You know, we wouldn't just say, hey, there's some scotch on the table and a cigar, and, you know, do what you want to do. If you choose to smoke and curse and drink, then that's fine. We would never do that. So, but when it comes to other activities like martial arts or other really organized activities, if a kid wanes or their energy starts to go somewhere else, immediately we allow them to quit and move on to something else. That's like a plague, I think, in our culture nowadays. And my parents never did that. They never allowed it. It wasn't even a discussion, to be honest. Like, it was something that I did. I thought, like, in my life, because I've been doing it so long, I go to school, I go to the martial arts, you know, I train on my own when I don't have the time. And I, you know, continue that way. And to be honest, too, I really wanted it myself. You know, I really wanted to be like those idols, like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris and, you know, all those famous martial artists that were out there. I wanted to be able to be as good as them on screen, on film. And, you know, I thought it was just a great thing. And I was always striving to be better and better.
I understand that. I mean, with my family, it was always just do something.
Yeah.
So I used to do skating, then I would do skateboarding, and then I did stage crew after school. And then my senior year, I said, I'm just going to get a job and work after school. And my parents were like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? Like, you really like stage crew? I'm like, nah. At that point, I was just like, I just wanted to be out of school. I was 18. I turned 18 in high school. So I was like, man, I need to make money. But it's always like, it's good to have something where it's like you either have like a task, responsibility outside of school. Just stay out of trouble, really.
So in any of those things you did, do you ever regret it and say, I wish I would have stayed longer, or it was just a natural progression?
It was a natural progression. Figure skating, I just kind of lost interest, and I picked up skateboarding. I thought it was cool. I saw.
I used to skateboard as well.
Oh, you did? Yeah. See,
yeah, but
you know,
back when I skateboarded, like, the coolest thing was, like, you know, getting a little bit of you know, air off the lip of the pool, or the, you know, or whatever you're skating on. Nowadays, it's just
it's crazy.
Extreme. It's amazing.
I used to throw myself down stair sets off.
Crazy.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
But then I lost interest in that so I started working out around the time I started skateboarding. That's the one thing I regret not sticking with.
Right.
Was sticking with working out, because I was bullied a lot as a kid. And I'm short. I'm 5'4".
Yeah.
So it's like, if I had that extra size, I would have felt more confident. But the reason why I continue now, so I've been consistently working out for 3 years. And what made me want to do that continuously is I was moving out of my apartment at 22, and I was 115 pounds.
Right.
And I couldn't even lift up a box of dishes to move out. I'm like, how am I going to be a man? I can't even, you know, how am I going to live on my own? So
that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, like, for me, like, for example, when I said I did 3 things, martial arts, you know, it was, my focus was on girls, martial arts, and music. Like, I have a very addictive personality. Fortunately, all my addictions are healthy. And never did a drug, never ever tried to do a drug, never tried to smoke pot or do anything like that. I've had a few, you know, tastes of alcohol. Once I got really, really drunk, the first time I ever drank, and then I really never got involved after that. but my personality was very addictive. So like when it came to even the music industry, I was always and forever, like I was in a band and we were recording music and we practiced every day, 6 days a week, disciplined. We would play out and tour around, New York State, and we even did a few stints upstate and out of the state. And I played with a lot of famous rock and roll bands that were of the 80s and 90s. Like we opened up for bands like Cinderella and bands that are, superstars, and for me, that was my drive. I wanted to, be great. And when I get my head around something like that, that's all I do is obsess about being as best as I could be at whatever. And so the martial arts, I work so hard at that, music as well, and those are the things that I really loved doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's important for kids too, is to find what they like, so that way it continues forward. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have drive. Where a lot of parents just force their kids to do stuff. But then here's the problem where, and not that I'm saying that parents shouldn't encourage their kids to do stuff, but once they get to college, it's like, all right, what do I do now? Like there's a lot of that. Like when I was in school, there was a lot of people, they're like, yeah, my parents forced me to go to college. I don't want to be here, and I'm just majoring in whatever.
I think, well, that's society's progression. It's like you go to school, elementary school, then middle school, then high school. What's next? College.
Yeah.
And sadly, college is not for everyone. I didn't go to college. I graduated high school barely. When I say barely, like I had no interest in school whatsoever, right? Like I wanted to get out of school as quick as I could so I could be involved in, sports or martial arts or whatever. Like I wanted nothing to do with school. I think I probably was voted most likely to be in prison by some of my school teachers because I always was fighting in school. I had long hair because I was in a band. I said to always defend myself against the jocks in the school. And, it was like a running theme that they were always trying to start a fight with me. Fortunately, I knew how to fight. And back then, you either knew how to fight or you didn't. It's not like it is nowadays where people kind of have an understanding of fighting. They've watched UFC. They know some basic chokeholds. They can do some takedowns. They have a lot more skill level. The novice person, right? So back when it was either you did or you didn't.
Yeah.
So I did really, really well. People would start a fight with me. I'd defend myself and win and, move on and so on. But I really never loved school so much, but I loved learning, right? So you could give me a book on martial arts or music or things that I like filmmaking or whatever it might have been. I was digging in deep, right? Same thing with music. Like that's all I did was try to practice and get better. And the martial arts was no different, but I had the aptitude that I could do it. Right now I've written 5 books and, traveled the world speaking as a keynote speaker and public speaker and been sought after to go teach in other countries like Australia and England and Italy and so on. So, school isn't always for everybody, although I do believe you should have a basic education. And sometimes I think it's good for people to do, vocational, more trade type schools like, electrical or mechanics or air conditioning or whatever, so that you could get a career. Because sometimes we flounder through school, we go to college, we don't know what to choose, and we graduate and we have no skill set whatsoever still.
Yeah. I know a lot of people like that where I went to school for mass communications, and I was always finding a way to set myself ahead because the program was changing at that time. So they cut a lot of the production-oriented courses, and I was like, well, I gotta produce stuff so that way employers could look at me.
Right.
And then that's how I actually ended up teaching myself all this other stuff.
Oh, that's great.
But then I realized it's like the field. It also depends on the field you're in too.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, unless you're working for like a major studio.
Right.
If you're in this field, it's very difficult. So that's why I opened my own business, because it's just, there's more opportunity for growth that way when you make the growth.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like that too. I always was a businessman. I've had 1 or 2 jobs, I think it was, in my entire life that I worked for a boss. So I've been self-employed in some capacity since I'm like 16 years old. owned a landscape construction company and built that business up to be $1 million business, actually. And I eventually ended up selling it. And at the same time, I was running my martial arts school. And I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go full-heartedly into the martial arts school. And because I love it. And I love helping people. I love teaching. And I realized, hey, I can make a decent living at it, and, you know, and so on. So that's where I said, I'll sell my landscape business and I'll focus 100% on that. And that's probably been about 30 years ago that I did that, when I dove in headfirst, you know, and said, this is what's going to be my living. And I had to make it work.
So I was actually reading one of the posters you have on the wall over there, and said you had multiple locations at one point.
Yeah.
So there were multiple ninjitsu centers across the island.
Long Island Ninjitsu centers. We had 5 of them on Long Island. And then we had a few out of the country: Costa Rica, Puerto Rico. Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Bermuda. And we had schools upstate New York, one in Michigan, and affiliate locations that were teaching. So yeah, I was really going at it full force. I wanted to build an empire. And then I had something sidetrack me, which was my daughter was born. It wasn't a sidetrack at all. Best thing that ever happened. But she, you know, I made a point to myself to say, listen, if my daughter needs my time, if she asked me more than once for something, I could have been on a call for a business meeting and she's like, Dad, I want Dad. And I'm like, okay, I got to go. I'll call you back tomorrow. She was top priority. And then I realized I was teaching in all these locations, traveling once every few months out of the country to other places. And it was not easy to do that and have a daughter. So I said, you know, I'm going to start the out of the country schools. I started to get rid of them and let them run them on their own, or maybe go under someone else so that they could have their schools run by other masters or teachers. And then eventually on Long Island, we started to shut down the locations, so that I ended up with 2. And for the longest time, I ran 2, East Islip and West Islip.
Oh, wow.
And my West Islip school was the school I started in, and that was like 31 years before or 30 years before COVID hit.
Oh, wow.
And then I had this school too simultaneously, which is in my East Islip location. I was able to do both. But I said, you know what, it'd be great. After COVID, I said to my main instructor and student, Renchi Ryan, and I said, why don't we just do the one location? And that would be it. Both of us will be here all the time. If I'm not here, you're here. If you're not here, I'm here. And it was great. It was like taking a 50-pound backpack filled with cement off, right? And being able to just enjoy life. And I'm older now. I'm 59 years old. So I just wanted to really start, you know, who knows how long you're going to live? Right? You know, life is short, and, you know, many people work just so they could retire, and they live for another few years and die.
Yeah.
It's a sad reality that we do that in our society. You know, I think that and they're trying to push the retirement age
72
up.
now.
It's ridiculous. It's
actually 72
it
for
has
Social
been moved
Security.
Up.
Yeah.
I thought it wasn't official, but that's crazy. So like, who wants to work until they're 72? And you could barely move, you know, if you're in great shape even, you know, you don't have a lot of life at the end of your lifespan left, right? Even if you live to 90, that's only like 15, 20 years, if that, right? If you're retiring at 70, to enjoy what you worked your whole life for.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
I remember, and the thing is too, in retirement, a lot of people just stop.
Yeah.
Even they're like, oh, I'm going to do all this stuff, and then they're just on the couch. And then that's how people really decline.
Yeah.
When you don't move. And I agree with you.
I do have insight on that too, though, right? Like, when I think about it, when you have no more purpose, then you lose your drive for living. So I find that I'll always be involved in the martial arts to some extent, whether it be me teaching periodically. If I retired and Renchi Ryan runs the school and he ends up taking it over, I'll still come in and do periodic seminars, or I'll teach around the world when people ask me. I'll write books, I'll write articles, I'll still do that kind of stuff, but I'll still be involved and have a purpose. But I understand how that could happen, where you start asking, like, what's my why? Like, why do I do things anymore? Like, why do I wake up in the morning? You got to have a purpose.
That's the thing, and I feel that's kind of one of the reasons I started my business too, is because you don't know when you're going to die.
Right.
And I was miserable. I loved what I did, but I worked at a radio station, and it was in MacArthur Airport, and I was sitting in the studio, and I'm 23, and I'm like, I'm 23, and the youngest coworker I have that I see every day is 55.
Wow.
And I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, I should be around people my age. I should be exploring things. And I just said, you know, I live at home. I'm not going to get the most I'd make at the company was maybe $45,000 a year.
Right.
was like, screw it, let's just take a risk.
Yeah,
And I did.
And I'm glad you did, because I think that's good that you do that. And everyone should at some point take a risk. And by the way, risk is not for everyone. Some people like to live a very, very safe, comfortable life with a job and a paycheck, and they come home at a certain time. And I get that. Like being self-employed and running my life as, whatever I produced is what I got. Right? Like, so if I was a gardener and I was growing vegetables, if I had a bad yield that year, I wouldn't eat that much, right? So you have to learn how to produce more. Yeah. And the same thing goes for a business or a business owner, and how to live your life where you have these things. And I was very fortunate to always, think about those things and invest money and buy real estate and, build businesses and do coaching and consulting for other companies and, that kind of thing. And that's what made it to the point where if I wanted to retire, I could. Mm-hmm. At this point right now in my life, I could just retire. But I don't want to. I enjoy doing what I do, although sometimes it's frustrating. And I say to myself, why am I still doing this at this age? But I do enjoy what I do. I do love the martial arts, and I love helping people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My dad's the same way. He also he's actually one of the reasons I own a company.
Oh, good.
Very entrepreneurially minded. And he's the same way. He's like, I could retire right now, but I like what I do. I like helping people. And that's the big part about being an entrepreneur is not just having the money aspect, but if you have the drive to help people.
Right.
Like I love helping people with my business. Mm-hmm. You love helping yours.
Yeah.
And that's how you stay humble.
Yeah.
I feel there's a big culture shift that I've seen in my generation where it's like, just stack paper, then it costs. Get the Lambo, get the very materialistic.
Yeah.
And that's not the right way to do it.
Yeah, I find that people that are just money driven, it doesn't matter who you are, celebrities, musicians, and I've known some very famous both actors and musicians, and it doesn't live that long. Like it doesn't really help them. It's not a long, doesn't have a long life to it when all you care about is making money. Because, like you look at all these celebrities, you say, like, how could they have killed themselves and committed suicide? They had everything, money, fancy cars, fancy houses, beautiful wives and families, and they're inherently unhappy, right?
They had no freedom.
Yeah, and freedom. They could do anything they want, anytime they want, but why are they killing themselves and committing suicide? And let's not get into the whole chemical makeup and why they're depressed and all that stuff. But my real point is that just having those things doesn't make you happy. Learning how to be happy is a task. And, and that's what I also teach in the martial arts. And I wish more parents that, that had their kids in my school understood that, the martial arts doesn't make you just how to fight. It also teaches you how to live your life and to have the most fulfilled life. Sometimes, though, my students don't understand that. They don't get it, and they don't live that way. They don't, their kid wants to quit, they quit. They don't see it as such a life-changing activity. So I find I'm sad for that. And that's something that's always been frustrating to me since the day I opened my school.
That's how I view the gym. Mm-hmm. I view the gym as it teaches patience, excellence, perseverance.
Yeah.
And it's an activity. It's a social place where you can meet people, and it's community. It is sad that it's only seen as like an activity or a vanity thing.
Right.
Some people just want to be badasses.
Yeah, and you know what? Listen, being in shape and being in great shape is awesome. People get addicted to that, and all they do is train, right? And that's a good thing. It's a good addiction, right? But I do see so many people, they start, they quit, next year I'll get back to it then, or, they don't have that discipline and fortitude and what I call grit, right? The dedication to not stopping when things seem difficult or when they're boring or when they're just, you become complacent and you start to not realize that, you're slipping backwards.
Well, that's our society too. I feel like once, I know it. I saw it when I was growing up. A lot of kids were given iPhones quickly. I was given an iPhone, but I wasn't like addicted to it because I was also an outdoors kid. But I feel like when I hear parents say, "Oh, like this kid's always on the game," This kid's always on the phone. Well, who bought them the phone?
Right.
If they worked for it, like I worked for my Xbox, I worked for other stuff that I've bought. That's different. If I'm on it all the time, I earn the right to do that because I paid for it. I have dedication
but
to
it's
it.
the society now, right? Like
entitlement.
So I'll give you an example. Many years ago, maybe like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, I had a ranch upstate, 20-acre ranch, and we called it our ninja retreat. Zip lines and gun range and archery range and like cleared land and a tennis court to practice our throwing knives and shurikens and all this stuff. And I remember we would do the week before the weekend that we would do the adults. The week before, we'd bring up the kids for 4 days, called sleepaway camp. And I remember all 20 kids getting up there, and I said, okay, go out and explore. Like, this is my property. Don't go beyond that. Be careful of this and that, and just take a few minutes. We just got there. Go and enjoy. And like 10 minutes later, I hear all this chatter, and I look out on this little like 6x6 cement patio I had, and all 20 kids are on that patio standing there. They had no idea what to do. Like, they didn't know what exploring meant.
And this was 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago in the outdoors. They just never did it because it wasn't how they were raised. Now, like me, on the other hand, my mom would, no joke, this is no joke at all. She'd say, here's a shovel and a machete. In fact, I have a machete. That's my machete right there on the wall, right on that weapon.
Can I take it down to show the camera?
You could, yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Just be careful if nothing's laying on top of it, then that stuff will fall. Yeah,
wow.
That was my machete. You can show the camera.
Guys, check this out.
So my mom would say, go out and chop some trees and build a fort and go have fun, right? Like it was like no question, like what I needed to do. And so interesting that, we would make stuff out of nothing. We would build a tree fort, we'd build a regular fort, but we were always outside, and we were riding our dirt bikes. Like I had a dirt bike and I used to race on, actually I raced on Team Suzuki back 40 years ago. It's got to be even more. And I used to race dirt bikes and bicycles and skateboarding. But we were always active and doing things. Nowadays, I find it kind of sad, but I also understand why. A parent goes out to dinner, husband and wife and their 2 kids, and they set the kids up at the table. They flip open the iPads, and they have what's called a digital babysitter. Yeah. And I understand because the parents are struggling to have peace and quiet and a nice dinner out together. But they have the kids who maybe not acting, that way or, in accordance with the restaurant. So they put up these digital babysitters. However, with my daughter, I taught her how to sit quietly and listen. And she was 3 and 4 and 5 years old. We'd have full conversations. She was a part of the conversation. I'd take her to these big training gatherings with my friends that were all martial artists. And she'd sit at the table and have conversations with 30, 40-year-old men and women like she was part of the table.
That's how I was raised.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's how we raise our children, and what we do. And if we give them the opportunity to quit everything, they're going to learn how to quit at everything they do. Yeah. If they're always bored because they need electronic stimulation, they're going to get bored quick. I have parents that come to me and they say, hey, my kid has ADD, ADHD. And whether they do or don't, or whether it's extreme or mild, I'm like, we need to teach them how to stick with things, how to stay with them and challenge them. And it's interesting. I have one parent recently, we had a conversation about that. And I said, here's some really good tips. He's like, wow, that's great. Like, those are some good tips that you just gave me. I'm like, well, in my head, I'm thinking like, why haven't they researched that on their own? Why haven't they learned that on their own? Because a lot of times parents feel like they don't have any kind of help. They don't feel like they have an avenue or, something that they can do about it.
And yeah, and it's a lot of parents. It's a lot of parents. I hated the iPad kid thing. When I saw that, the first time I saw it, I was 15. I was a busboy, and I saw 6 kids at a table with 2 parents, and I was like, oh, well, holy crap, God bless you. But then all of them had iPads.
Yeah.
And the thing is that really teaches, one, you don't know what's on that iPad, what those kids are being programmed to look at.
Right.
And it definitely makes you antisocial. A lot of these kids are very antisocial, and I feel like that's why we have a lot of the societal problems we do.
Yeah.
High rates of drug addiction, high rates of depression, suicide, mass casualty events. A lot of it is down to that.
I don't disagree that it has a lot to do with it, but I think like every parent has the opportunity to
change.
do what I did.
Yeah.
And take the time and spend it with my daughter. And yeah, she had an iPad. I remember, not an iPad. Well, she did, but she had the DS Switch or something, like back in the day, whatever but we limited it, and we spent a lot of time together. When I was a single dad, it was just her and I. I made sure I spent time with her. Like, we played board games, we made up stories, we'd go on adventures. Like in Japanese culture, they don't say, hey, we're going for a walk. They always say, I'm going to teach my child how to appreciate nature, right? They don't say, we're folding paper. I'm going to teach them origami, or we're going to cook together. I'm going to teach them the art of cooking. Like, everything is a lesson. And I love that because, and people don't appreciate that much in our culture. They don't take that time. And I'm kind of sad for parents that, man, it's not a parent's fault. They're work so hard. It's so expensive. Their time is taken up because they're running from one activity to the other. Like, a lot of times the parents will say, oh, well, we have, 3 different sports. And I would say to them, listen, it probably doesn't make sense to do another one. Just get good at those. Like, don't join my school if you don't have the time to dedicate to the training, because then you're just dabbling and you're going to eventually quit anyway.
That's wasted money.
Yeah, it's a waste of your money. It's a waste of my time, a waste of your time. But if you can decide, hey, we're going to put martial arts in place of maybe these other sports, not all of them, but some of them, you'll get a much more beneficial experience out of it.
That's smart. I mean, a lot of people do overwhelm as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big thing. That was a big thing when I was a kid. I did martial arts. I did soccer, baseball, and basketball.
Right.
And I was like, I don't want to do any of this. Baseball stuck the longest. I did baseball from 3 to 14.
I loved baseball too. I was a big baseball guy. I wanted to be a professional baseball player. Yeah, like I played up to Connie Mack League, which is Little League, all the way and up to like right before you get into college. Like whatever the highest Little League baseball would take you.
Yeah.
But again, I was addicted to that too. Like, I remember, like, anything that I've ever done, I remember wanting it so bad that, I don't know if you ever had this experience where it hurts in your stomach. Like, you want something with that much desire, right? And I don't see that inspiration as much in children nowadays. It has certainly changed. Being that I've been doing this for 33 years, it's certain I could see the difference in 5-year intervals of how kids and people and adults have changed over the years. From, like, let's say when I started when I was, my first martial arts school, I was 16 years old. My teacher basically handed me the keys and he said, you take over. And he left. And I ran that school for like 2 or 3 years by myself. I knew nothing about business. I made my own business cards at print shop in school, and I promoted it and got people to join, and I would teach. And then eventually I just wanted to train and just be a student again. So I said, I'm not going to run this school anymore. And I closed it down. And that's when I met my first American ninjitsu teacher back in the 80s. But, I think that, I had that desire, and I don't see that as the time has gone by. Even in adults, they make excuses. Well, I can't do this anymore. My schedule changed. Well, okay, well, work around that.
Work around, yeah.
Do whatever.
Wake up earlier.
Yeah, or whatever you could do to maybe ask your boss if you could leave a little earlier, on a specific day so you could make it to class, right? Or come on the weekends, whatever it may be. But I think people immediately start making excuses.
Yeah. Well, I blame it also, and I'd be interested to hear your take on it. I don't think the nation as a whole has a purpose anymore.
Right.
Once the Cold War ended, that's when all this really started.
Yeah.
We have no external threat, really, that we could point to and say, that's the enemy, definitively.
Yeah, well, we still do, right? Like, we still are pointing our fingers at certain countries they're the enemy still, even though that they may not be. But I agree with you. Like, what is the purpose? The purpose was for America to be the best and most industrialized country in the world, producing the best goods, and, going out there and making steel, and, taking over the television industry.
Being the strongest you could be. Like, even gyms. Like, in school, gym class.
Yeah.
Half the class would be sitting with their regular school clothes on, not doing anything.
That's amazing to me. It's funny. We were looking at
that was 10 years ago when I was in.
Well, we were just recently, last year or the year before, maybe 2 years at maximum, we're viewing a high school for a tournament, because I run a tournament circuit as well.
Nice.
And we were looking for a new venue, so that we were walking through with the janitor, and we walked through a gym class in action. And it was shocking. Like, they were playing badminton. There was one kid, I'm not to be mean, but we're looking at him and he's like throwing it up like 7 times he missed before he hit it once, right? And then we see another kid in the corner playing guitar. Another kid's got the racket, but he's in a 3-piece suit, like literally suit and tie, vest and everything, and shoes. And the gym teacher comes over and said, "Can we get that racket? Because other kids want to play." And there's some girls doing their makeup, like people. I remember it was like you got in your clothes and you lined up. He took roll call and you played. If you didn't play, you failed. And if you failed, you're going to summer school.
Yeah.
Right. So there were consequences. Now everyone is just so fluffy. Like, hey, listen, if you want to do it, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. There's too many opportunities to be able to do whatever you feel like you should do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't teach people a good moral code or a code of ethics. It doesn't help them with that at all.
I even remember like being in gym class and we would do the weight room.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And ask me if you need help with anything. And I'm like, I don't know how to
Yeah.
I don't know how to work. I'm like
Yeah,
15. I've never been in a gym. So it's like no regimentation.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're a senior and it was like, all right, here's 2-hour period, 1 hour is constructive, the other hour is free to do fitness however you want, but you have to be working.
Yeah.
But there's none of that. And then even the after school programs, they're only like an hour.
Right.
And then you're feeding these kids crap. So it's going to affect their mind state. The schooling system has collapsed.
A lot. I think
the
society
90s.
in general, we're caught up in that. I think there's got to be some sort of change, or else the path that we're taking, sadly, is a dangerous path that we're going down. And what I see how people act and the things that are going on in society right now. Like I saw a video the other day of these young teenagers thought it was cute to just like open the person's door and walk into someone's house and take their shoes off and sit on their couch. And the father's like, "You better get out of here. I have children here." And they're like, "Yo, what's the problem, buddy?" In my particular situation, that'd be very dangerous.
That's how you get shot.
Break into my house. Yeah, you could get shot. You could get, beat up real bad. You could get, stabbed. Like, it's just crazy that they're playing these games for fun. And they don't have any values at all. Like my mom and dad would have been like, "Are you kidding me? You did this? You're going to be locked in your room for the next, 2 months."
Yeah.
They would take away everything that I ever loved. They'd make my life miserable. Although I was smart enough to never do silly things like that. And the things that people do and the disrespect for law enforcement or authority in any way, shape, or form, and the way we treat our society and our country and the land we live on, it's just shocking to me. It's depressing in a way.
They care more about other countries than themselves. And
we could get into a whole political thing.
We could.
I could go down that rabbit hole and we could be here for another 3 hours. But I always found it weird how, like for example, when my dad was, an older man before he passed away, he was making like on his Social Security and his police pension, he was making like a total of maybe $1,900 a month. And, thank God that I was well-to-do and well off where I could take him in my house and, help him survive and, because he had been poor. And many of our elderly are poor and they can't afford it, yet we're giving money to people that we don't know from other places that we don't know where they came from and what they did. And we're not taking care of our own. That's the thing that just drives me nuts. Like, I don't understand how we could do that. Why are our citizens, our people, second to the people who are coming into our country?
Even our belief system. You talk about the Constitution. Any of the amendments or any of the rights were given, and people are like, "Oh, I don't really care. What's that got to do with me?"
Yeah.
I'm like, it feels like very like a hollowed out shell when I talk to a lot of people.
Yeah, agreements like, back in the day when I first opened my school, people cared about a handshake. They cared about, an agreement between two people. Nowadays, I have 4 people that haven't paid their tuition and their kids are stopped coming. Although they're in a program where they're supposed to pay until the program ends. It's an agreement, right? And 4 of them just decided not to come anymore and canceled their credit cards. And they just ignore, they ignore me, they ignore my, even a simple text message saying, hey, what happened? Is everything okay? Like, let me know what's going on at least. But the minute they decided not to come anymore, they ghost me. And believe it or not, 3 of them, and I love police officers, but 3 of them happen to be cops.
Wow.
And I would say, like, I would think like they would have that integrity to be able to not do that, and it's not.
A lot of people in it for a paycheck. It's the same thing with the military.
And it's just like a lot of people don't have that integrity. It's
Yeah.
what's good for them, like what's in it for me. And when it's no longer beneficial to me, I'm no longer committed to it. I always say, like in my martial arts school, people love you until they no longer have use for you at times. So they love your school, they love the training, they love what you're doing, and you're doing so well. Oh, my kid doesn't want to go anymore. Okay, we no longer are going to come, and they disappear. And it's hard on. This is another thing that's very, very difficult on martial art teachers, because we have students that are with us for years. Right? They not like you. If I was a school teacher, they'd be with me for 3rd grade, and then they'd move on to 4th grade, and maybe I see them in the hall and wave. I mean, I have students that I've seen grow up from 3-year-olds to like 17-year-olds. They're like part of my family. I know them. I know about them. I know what they do, what they like. We're close. And then one day you never see them again.
They never say anything. They're just
not even a goodbye sometimes. Not even, hey, I decided to do it. I'm too busy with other things. Like, almost like, hey, see you, like not even a see you later. Just one day they don't show up, and I'm texting, what you doing? What's going on? Where you been? I had this one young kid who I really liked. I mean, really, really, had an affection for him. Responsible, it seemed to be responsible young man. Worked for us, had a day that he was working and getting paid, and he was training, he was in our leadership team, and this one day disappeared. Never saw him ever again. He never responded to any of my text messages. I text the mother. I text him on his personal cell phone because I had his phone number. Nothing. He was gone, and that was it. It's almost as somebody hit the delete button, and he just went away. Poof, gone.
Wow.
And that happens quite often. And it's pretty tough, even though I've been doing this so long, to take. But I've gotten used to it because it's something that I've been dealing with for many, many, many years.
Right, and I guess that's just part of the business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that's tough. There is a lot of people like that too. Like even with friends. Like,
yeah.
I could write a book. I could write a book, but it's people are viewed as disposable.
Yeah.
In today's world, and it's the commodification of people.
Yeah.
I've seen it where even on dating apps, like that's the primary way people my age meet each other.
Right.
And people are seen as disposable.
Yeah.
Or just like, oh, that's great. It didn't work out. F you. I'm gonna go.
Yeah. I think there's a phenomenon behind that, and there's a phenomenon behind what I said too about that one student. So I think that I think a lot, but I know,
do too.
I know, right? I know that it's much easier to disappear or be angry or be upset with someone rather than to live up to it and say, hey, listen, Shihan, my life is tough right now. I'm just not going to come for a while. So I'm going to take a break. I might be like, you shouldn't. Let me try to talk you out. No. I just have to do this for myself right now. I would respect that. I may not agree with it, and I might try to change the person's mind, but at the same time, I would respect that rather than just disappearing. It's much easier to just ghost the person. Same with dating, or saying, screw you, or you did something wrong, or you're upset with the person. It's easy to get upset with someone. That's how most breakups end up in litigation, because, people love each other until they no longer love each other. And the only way that they could break up is by being angry with each other. My ex-wife and I are best of friends, and my daughter's mom. And in fact, to the point where she'll go out to dinner with my wife now and I and my daughter, and we're like friends. We've traveled together, done things together. And, but it took a lot to be able to be best friends. Like, it wasn't easy, because the pathway society took you down was always the fight. Like, wow, you're going to let him get away with that? Or wow, you're not going to sue him for this or that, or back and like, that's the way it naturally progresses, when people get divorced. We didn't use a lawyer. We just worked it all out ourselves. People could not understand it. For the longest time, we'd show up to school for my daughter's entire high school, all the way through elementary school. We'd be there together, and people were like, "Oh, you and your husband are great together." Like meanwhile in our heads, we're like, "Wow, we're separated and divorced, right?" Yeah. But people didn't know that because of the way we acted, and we did that for the benefit of my daughter.
Yeah.
But it ended up being for our benefit too. In fact, her and I just texted and chatted for a whole bunch of time yesterday.
Nice.
We're still really close. So it takes strength to overcome those things.
Yeah, and conflict resolution is sadly not in
a
lot. Even I saw something about 2 years ago, and I go work out in Mastic, and I saw this thing on the news where there was a disagreement these kids had over a bag of weed, and they killed this kid over $20 worth of drugs.
Yeah.
And they put it on Snapchat, like, yeah, we're smoking that hot pack, we're smoking that dead pack. And I'm like, you couldn't just fight, just have a fist fight and just call it a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no respect for human life anymore.
There isn't. The fiber of humanity has degraded so bad. It's to the point where people don't value the things they used to value, like your word and your honor and your integrity and being kind to others, like the things that they do to acquire social media, likes, or to, be popular amongst their crew of friends. I mean, it just blows me away where I go, what were they thinking? Like, what is happening with our world?
I've seen a few years ago, there was this thing, I forgot what it was called, but there was a challenge on TikTok where you were supposed to steal shit from the school, and they'd steal toilets, they'd steal sinks. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were scumbags when I was in school too, but it wasn't made to be a social media trend. They just had schizophrenia. So or they were drugged out.
Right.
But now it's like a whole culture of just let's see what damage we can do for likes.
Well, back in the day, if that were the case and they showed that, that would be evidence, called evidence,
yes.
Right? And you would get the cops to come to your house and they'd show the video and they'd handcuff you, arrest you, make you spend a few days in jail. Then you have to go to court and maybe you'd do time or you wouldn't. You'd pay a huge fine. Nowadays, there's no consequences whatsoever. There's
especially
no consequences for anything. Yeah, especially New York. New York is a lawless state. Sad to me because New York has always been the whole, the pillar of the United States. People looked at us for business and real estate and, restaurants and nightlife, and people they wanted to go to New York. Nowadays, people are afraid to be in New York. And, our society, the way that our government is running the city, it's just a nightmare. Like, it's just crazy.
We're fortunate we at least live in Suffolk County.
Yeah.
Where it's somewhat decent, but even so, I mean, crime's on the rise.
Exactly.
Home invasions are up.
Yeah.
I look at my Ring app and I see just within a mile of my house, because I live in Yaphank, but you get Mastic, you get Medford, carjackings. Someone was scoping out my car before I totaled it about, I don't know, a few weeks ago.
Wow.
And they were just checking me out, checking the car out, checking me out, and then they drove away. I've had people try to break into my dad's truck a few years ago. I've had crackheads come up to me when I'm waiting for the school bus. Yeah. It's even out here.
It is, but it's not as bad as it is in the city. But then again, that's the whole entire lawless community. Like, if you have no consequences and you could do whatever you want, and attack a police officer, like it happened in Manhattan, where that gang of kids, illegal aliens, attacked a police officer, and they were walking out the courtroom, giving the cops the finger.
Oh yeah.
Like a few, not even in the courtroom, just out of the jailhouse, 20 minutes later.
And that's who we're bringing in.
Yeah, it's so it's not, it's not even about that. It's just that, of course, they're going to they have up to $900 that they could steal. They're allowed to. I don't know the exact numbers.
$950.
But when you allow people to do something, why aren't you going to do it? Because there are certain people that just have no morals at all. They'll do that. And because that's how they live their lives.
And that's why a lot of the box stores are closing down in a lot of those areas, because no one wants to do business. I personally, I won't go into the city unless I'm carrying a gun. There's no way I'm doing that, and I wouldn't go into the city unless it was a business purpose.
Right.
And even then, I'm carrying, because this equipment's insane. And it's sad that has to be a reality, that you have to feel like that. But you go upstate, if someone does something like that, they're getting tackled to the floor, they're getting beat up, because that's a different world up there. There's still that old, I feel like, I know, I have the same problem. When you go to a rural area, there's more respect. There's more old school value. There's less of that in urban areas.
I agree. And again, it's just because we allow it.
Yeah.
And if you allow it, don't expect people not to do it. You know what I mean? That's just the way it is. And so that's why I believe we'll go back to martial
Right.
arts and on a positive note, like that's why I believe the martial arts schools and the teachers, and there's many of them, so many great martial arts schools and teachers out there that are changing society. They're doing well to give young kids and adults that need direction, the directions they need, the spirituality, the focus, the control, the discipline, all of that. They're giving that to the students. And they're sages, in my opinion, like so many of these martial arts schools. And I know so many of them. Just this morning, I went out to breakfast with 5 of my friends, and they're great people, and they all are doing the same thing as I am, trying to reach students and help those students and change their lives. So just multiply that by 1,000 or 2,000 schools in New York State, or 3,000 or whatever it is, and think about if every one of them are affecting between 50 and 150 students. That's a massive amount of people that have some good positive influence because of the martial arts. And don't get me wrong, the coaches do that in football. They try to keep their kids on the beaten path and stay out of trouble, and other sports and so on and so forth. But I believe the martial arts is more holistic and spiritual, and it delves into many aspects of their lives. So they could be great at one aspect of the martial arts and not others. In sports, if you're not good at that sport,
Yeah, you're out.
you're not playing, you're on the bench, you're not going to be recognized. So the martial arts gives them many areas and venues for them to be recognized and, be able to succeed in, so that a lot more people have a better chance of doing well in the martial arts.
So would you say that your students are, as a whole, as a collective, better today than they were when they started, in person and in ability?
People in general definitely grow by being in my martial arts school. They definitely improve. And I see it too, even with my little kids, like the 2-year-olds, right? Like some of them train and they're 5 now, and they barely could walk and talk at 2. Now they're doing, pretty extensive moves and grappling and throws and wrestling, and they do really well at other sports because they have much more hand-eye coordination and ability. And yes, it definitely improves their lives. I have one mom who just wrote us a stellar testimonial about her young child who's like 3.5. And she said it literally changed how he acts. He's more respectful at home. He listens to his mom and his dad. He's more focused, mentally alert. He listens better because we have listening skills in our school, and that they have to pay attention and sit upright and respond and, focus their eyes on me when I'm talking, or my other instructors that are here. So yeah, it definitely, I've seen so many, over the last 32, 33 years, I've seen it change people's lives.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's
and
incredible.
There needs to be more of that, and I'm glad that there's still that, type of community to exist.
Yeah, it's still out there. I think it's still almost a little bit of a secret because people haven't really, it hasn't been mainstream like soccer or t-ball. Like everyone now knows martial arts is good for their kids, yet they don't know how good it really is, and they don't experience it, or they're too busy to go. Or some parents may think for their children that it's a violent activity, right? Because it comes from punching and kicking and throwing and grappling, right? It is a violent sport, but we learn how to teach it in a non-violent way so that they're not looking to hurt others, but they're learning how to defend themselves and learn to have that power to be able to control a situation, but not use it for the wrong reasons.
So how do you guys approach self-defense, especially in a state like New York, where our self-defense laws are barely...
Well, self-defense is all we do, right? So, and here's the thing. This is a misconception that I find to be funny, because I have some friends that say, we don't teach self-defense. But if you're a martial art and you punch and kick and block and fight back and forth, you're doing self-defense, right? In my opinion, that's self-defense. It may not be based off of scenarios that are more realistic in the street, so you might not be doing that kind of self-defense. In our school, we do. What if someone grabs you? What if someone bear hugs you? What if someone takes you to the ground? What if someone has a weapon? How do you fight against the weapon or defend against the weapon? We do all of that in our school. So, and how do we deal with it? It's we teach people the ins and outs of the law, like when to engage, when to try to disengage, when to stay away. And, my favorite saying is, um, uh, walk away today to be safe another day, something to that effect. I'll say that in my classes. Like, you need to learn how to be passive and say, listen, I don't want any trouble, man. I'm walking out of here. I don't want to fight with you. Like, it's not an ego thing. You need, because there's so many good people in prison for doing bad things
Yeah.
one time because they lost control. They got angry. Someone talked to their wife the wrong way, and they're like, you don't talk to my wife. Boom, they hit him, and that guy falls and hits the head and dies. And now say goodbye to your wife. You're not going to see her unless she visits you in prison now for the rest of your life. So learning how to have self-control and learning how to be able to stay out of trouble, learning to see things before they happen and, know like, hey, that group of kids look like they're up to no good. I'm not going to walk through them or walk near them. I'm going to turn and go this way or walk onto the other side of the road or do whatever I need to do. Right. So sometimes people don't have that mental awareness, but we teach that. We try to teach that in the martial arts.
That's good. And that's one of the key for self-defense. They teach us that in our concealed carry course that I'm taking right now. And it saves your life.
Yeah.
I remember I was 19, and you make a bunch of stupid mistakes at 19, but I was at a pawn shop. I was getting this watch appraised because I thought it was a real Rolex, but I knew it was fake, but it was fake.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't sure if it was fake or not. And this guy's like, oh, let me see that. And at this point, I knew it was a $20 watch. So I'm like, yeah, look at it, whatever. He's like, oh, that's cool. He kept chatting me up. He waited for me to leave, and he's following me down this alley. And then he's following me to the road with my car. I'm running to my car. He's running after me. I get out in time, obviously, but I mean, that was dumb because, one, don't talk to random people like that. If you notice the guy's up to something stupid, be like, just go somewhere in public and try to lose him, and don't go down a dark alleyway.
Right.
Those are three things that, now I know at 25.
The great ninja strategy in that particular situation would have been to grab the watch and go, man, this piece of crap's only worth $10. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And make sure that he heard that, because now he's not, why would he be interested? Like, yeah, keep it. Like that kind of thing. So that's another thing that we teach people is that awareness, like when to be able to talk your way out of a situation, looking and seeing things before they happen in a way, you could just tell. You get a weird feeling, and being able to train, God forbid, into in a realistic way that you have to defend yourself. At least you have some skills to be able to do that. I always tell my students, like, if they're practicing at 50% inside my dojo at 50%, when they perform outside, they're going to work at like 20%.
Yeah, because your adrenaline's going to kick in. So
you got to be at like 80% in the dojo where everything is perfect. Every scenario, the floor is smooth. You're not slipping. You're not nervous. You're not adrenalized, right? You want to train at 80%. So when something does happen, you're at, 60 or 50%, much better odds that way.
Yeah.
And, people make that mistake. Having a gun, I have my concealed carry permit too, and but having a gun, I've always said to myself, carrying a knife or having a gun is a huge responsibility because, God forbid you only want to use it in case of life and death situations where you have no other way out. It's either you are leaving or they're leaving, right? one of the two. However, sometimes when people have a gun, they react, or they have a knife, they react on that.
Just with that tool first.
Just for that, oh my God, let me pull my knife. Now everything is just escalated.
And that's no value for human life either. Right. Because it's like, there's so many ways, you could just walk away.
Right.
There's no point in engaging. Even if you're in a high school and you're just fighting in the hallway, kids have knives. Yeah. I knew so many kids that had knives.
Yeah.
Just walk away.
Right.
But if you are in a situation, that's the only time something like that should happen, is if you're in a corner and they're going to kill you.
Yeah.
And that's an unfortunate thing to deal with.
Back in junior high, I was in summer school, and I got attacked. At that time in my school, I went to West Islip High School, or junior high, and they were busing kids in from other areas.
Okay.
And I had these two kids jump me after school. One had a belly sewn. I don't know if you know what that is. It's got the two things and you flip it. And
the butterfly knife.
Yeah, butterfly knife. And he sliced it. I was very active in the Filipino martial arts training in knife fighting at the time. Cool. So every day I was drilling knife techniques and training parrying and so on. But anyway, he came at me and attacked me with the knife, and I was able to block it, parry it, disarm it. The knife went flying, and then I hit him, and the other guy came in, and I hit him, and then they ran. But the knife, I still have the knife to this day.
Do you really?
Nice. Because then I went and got the knife. However, interestingly enough, I'm walking home, and I'm like, oh, this is weird. This feels odd. I don't see blood or anything. I'm like this. Nothing, because it cut me here. I have the scar here.
No kidding.
And not an ounce of blood came out until I stopped at a payphone. You have to take out a call. I called my mom at work, and back in the day, this is how funny it was back then. She's like, okay, go to the hospital. Walk. You know how to walk to the hospital. So she didn't even come home from work. I'll see you later when I get off. I get off at 5. Okay. So I walk to the hospital. They call her. They didn't even ask permission. They just stitch me up. But the minute they put in the first needle for the stitch, that's when it started to pour blood. But until then, I had to look like this, and I opened my hand, and I could see the wound open. I could see inside the tendons. But that's how dangerous knife attacks are.
Yeah.
And, it's and I didn't even feel it. Thank God I could defend myself, but that could have been an internal organ, and it could have been one of my arteries, right? Something dangerous. But I've had an experience with that.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's crazy, but that's how quick, boom, you're in trouble. You're either this close to living and surviving, or that close to dying.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a scary situation.
I've had a knife pulled on me once in a Walmart, and I was just like, all right, I'm running. I'm out. Like, that's it.
And really, other than your ego, that you didn't stand up to the knife guy, what would it matter? Are you going to be, on social media, look at the guy who ran away from the knife, or would they say, smart man for running away from a knife attack?
I don't even know how to disarm a knife.
Yeah, exactly.
How am I gonna? The only way is if I had a projectile I could throw at the guy. If I had a paint cannon, I could throw it at him. But that's it. I can't do this.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
But I can't.
Well, I can because I've been trained in it. But then again, there's always an opportunity where you could get cut and stabbed, and even though you know what you're doing, because it happens
guaranteed
all the time.
It's not guaranteed.
Yeah. So that's kind of scary. But overall, I live such a great life because I love the martial arts. I love what I do. What better than to do what you love, for a living, and be able to teach and help people. And there are struggles, and it's, frustrating. And, at times, you deal with many issues that people don't realize. Most parents don't see, or families or students see, that you have bills to pay and a room to maintain and the roof over your head and pay for the oil and the electricity. And, they don't realize, they just think that, I just manifested this building, and the bills get paid by some, donor somewhere, and they just take care of everything I need. I'm up all night long. If someone's upset, I'm upset. I'm dealing with the frustrations. I have many sleepless nights where, I'm dealing with the business side of things, or a parent or a student or a person's mad at me because I said something the wrong way, or they didn't like what I said, or I was too harsh on them and critiqued them too harshly. Of course, because I want them to improve and be better, but they don't see it that way. So all of a sudden now they're mad at you. And then I have to deal with that. And I don't want them to be mad at me or upset. And so I deal with all those things. And us who, the school owners, we deal with that on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Something that no one even knows. It's the hidden, dirty secrets of running a school. Yeah. Everyone just thinks it's like you walk in, you bow, I'm out on the floor and I teach, and everyone bows and they leave, and everything is always perfect. But there's so many other factors that are involved in, running a school and being a sensei and teaching. And like I said before, too, students will start with me at 3 and they'll be with me until they're 16, 17, 19 years old. I have to constantly change my hats. Like a school teacher teaches for 6, 8 months or whatever the school year is, right? Then that student moves on to another teacher. Me, I'm having them come in. I got to change my hat. Well, it's a funny story, and I'll talk about it. Hopefully one day, maybe the guy will see this video. I had a young kid, and his name was Tomcat, right?
Tomcat?
Tomcat was his name. So as he grew with me, he changed his name to Tommy. I'd say Tomcat. He's like, no, it's Tommy now. Okay, Tommy, let's do this. And then he got a little older, and it was Thomas. Anyway, long story short, it eventually became Officer Thomas, Tom, but
wow.
He became a police officer.
Wow.
But I had to change with him as he matured. I'd have to change how I associated with him, what name I called him, how I treated him. As teachers, we're constantly doing that. We're constantly trying to shift as people grow. and change our personalities to mesh with their time in their life that they're having right now. So that's not that easy. But if I was a school teacher, I just deal with 6, 8 months. They'd leave and hey, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you. And the next grade. But we are molding them and shaping them and staying with them and trying to keep them active and happy and alive in the training and so on. So
and you've had some of these students for 20 years.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have had people that have trained with me, like my main guy, Ryan, who's out there teaching now. He's 21 years of training with me. I have another student by the name of Greg. He started me many, many years ago, quit for a long period of time, came back. But he started 24 years ago. I have another student, Chris. He's a black belt. He's been with me. Geez, it's got to be since like 93.
Wow.
Yeah, so 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah, and those are the far and few between. Sensei Dylan, he's also been with me since he's like 3 or 4, and he's like 17 now, driving he got a car, he just got his license. So it's great to see them grow. But inevitably, I've had many people that have grown apart, grown away. For some reason, maybe it's me, they end up not liking you or get mad at you, and then they don't talk to you anymore and they move on. And, it's disheartening in a way, but it's part of the progression, I guess.
Yeah. And, I had a good point I wanted to mention. Oh, yes, I had a question for you. So, the belt system. I've seen people switch schools and it seems like they reset belts, or if you stop for a while, your belt resets. How does all that?
Well, in my school, if you stop, you come back at the belt you were.
Okay.
You just have to take more time to remember what you forgot.
I see.
Right. But if I get someone who says, and I have this a lot, where a parent calls and says, oh, my son's a black belt in so-and-so's school. Do they have to start over? I'm like, absolutely.
Really?
And why? It's very simple. It's like, this is the easiest analogy to understand. I speak fluent English. I now go and start learning Spanish. I'm, a level 5 or 10 in English, right? Or Japanese, let's say. But now I'm learning Spanish. Do I get to have the level 10 that I had at a language that I've mastered, or do I have to start from scratch?
I see.
And it's exactly like that. Like, there are some martial arts that are similar-ish, and you'll pick up things quicker. But like in a system like my own, Ninjitsu, Ninpo, Jujitsu, it takes a lot to learn the specific curriculum.
Oh, I see. So it's based off of, because you have a different curriculum to a standard martial arts school, they have to reset the belt because it's a new practice. Okay, that makes sense.
You're learning brand new stuff that you've never learned before. You have some expertise. Like if you became a black belt in another style, and you joined another school that's totally different, you'd start at a white belt.
Yeah.
You'd never lose your skills of what you learned and acquired in the first school, but you can't be a black belt in this school because there's so much that you need to learn that others that have come to this school have learned, and they're better than you because you're just learning. Now, you may pick it up quicker because you're a decent martial artist, let's say, but you need to learn the curriculum. It's like learning the language. You got to learn it.
So, now, when it comes to getting a black belt, I know there's different degrees, but I've seen some kids here already in other schools that I've recorded where it's like they're 15 and they have like a level 3 black belt or something.
Yeah, like a 3rd degree black belt.
Yeah. So what happens when you if you max that out in like your 30s?
Well, there is no maxing it out really. Like you get to 10th degree black belts, right? And that could take a lifetime.
Really? Okay.
However, I have a friend, and he runs a school, and he doesn't have degrees. They just get to black belt.
Oh, okay.
And they train. That's all they do is train. They work out, get better, practice, keep and maintain, and get better. And they train. That's the concept of being a martial artist. You should be training. If you're constantly searching that next degree, there are reasons why we get degrees, and it's basically just to delineate who's this belt and who's that belt and who's the higher rank and who's been there the longest. And you're learning in our school, you learn different techniques for each belt level. So you have the opportunity at 3rd degree maybe to learn the 3rd degree black belt techniques. You learn 2nd degree black belt techniques. You can't learn them before a 3rd degree before you get to 3rd degree.
I see.
But it's definitely something that without a doubt is, it's different in every school. Like it's like a chiropractor takes 2 or 3 years or whatever their degree takes to become a chiropractor, and a general practitioner of a doctor takes a certain amount of degrees, and a surgeon and a microsurgeon or a neurosurgeon, there's a whole bunch more training involved in order to take on that career, right? So same thing goes for levels of black belt, right? So you can't, I mean, I know some people who give out dans first, second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way to 10th very easily, but that's their system.
I see.
They don't put as much value on those dans that maybe I would in my school.
I see. That's very interesting that it's not. Now, why is it not a uniform?
Because it's not the same system.
I see.
So like, you know, if it was a ninjitsu school under a specific teacher, like let's say if I had 10 schools under me and we followed a certain level curriculum, they would have to follow that curriculum in order to be able to be promoted to a certain level.
I see.
But if it was like 10 different ninjitsu systems that had nothing to do with my school, they have their own curriculum, their own requirements, their own things that they want to learn and do.
Interesting. That's really cool. Because okay, now here's a scenario for you. Say it was like a regular, I used to go to ATA a long time ago. Say I went back to ATA and I had my purple belt from when I was 5. Yeah. Would I still be a purple belt?
It depends on that school.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on that teacher and what they do. And every teacher could be different, even within the ATA association. And it might be like, you know, if you took off for 25 years and forgot everything you learned, it'd probably be better for you to say, I'm going to start off at white belt again.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's funny, like, you know, I play guitar, and for many, many years I played guitar, and then I stopped playing guitar for a long time. And I literally forgot how to play guitar. Like, forgot. Like, I was like poor at the guitar. But it's funny, like when I would do, let's say, a song, I'd know like 10 notes. And I play those 10 notes over and over and over again. All of a sudden, my brain would unlock like the next 5 notes. They were in my head. I don't remember where they were and remember what it was. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, now I got 5 more notes. It's back in your brain somewhere, and you just got to bring it back out again.
Oh, that's cool.
Although physical skills, a little different because, you know, you might have been 15 and now you're 40. You can't do what, you know what I mean? You can't do what you did at 15. You're not in as good a shape. You're not as fast. You don't learn as quick. You don't heal as well. So it takes a lot. But yes, I mean, I would say that if they were my student and they came back, which I've had recently, and one of them came back. I had one student, though, that had left me, went on because he moved, and then he ended up getting his black belt in another school. And then he moved back to the area, and now he's training with me again. He started off at white belt. Even though he's a black belt, like he was good. He's like, I just want to start from the beginning. And he's progressing very quickly because his skills are still there.
It's just been a while for him.
Yeah, it's just been a while. He's got to dig it out of that memory bank like that song that all of a sudden pops out.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's even like when I was starting to work out again, I was like, I remembered like, oh, like this is how you hold the dumbbell. This is how you do that.
And your body remembers.
That
like
muscle
later
memory
on, your muscle
while.
memory starts to get there, and your muscles build quicker. Because at one point they were stronger and they just have declined from lack of exercise, but you build quicker and you get in shape quicker because your muscle memory is there.
Yeah. Even with like mental things, like even if you're like sitting back in school, it's like you kind of remember like, oh, I do this and do that. Because I'll take like different tests and qualifications here and there. And I'm like, okay, like this is how you study. This is how you take notes. And it's like, oh, duh, you need a notebook to do that.
Yeah.
Even like handwriting, like my handwriting has always been garbage.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'll sit in a course and I'm like, oh, okay, this is how you draw the, because I spend all day typing and editing.
Right. I hear you. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's interesting how you guys run it. It's cool.
Do you have any other questions for it?
I think that's pretty much it for me.
I enjoyed it. I hope there was some knowledge out there. If people listen, I hope they get something out of it. I think that, you know, the reason why I do what I do is to teach and help and train people. And, you know, my goal, of course, is not even through these type of things, these podcasts, I want people to be better off because of it. Like maybe one thing they got, they're like, hey, I could do that in my life, or I could think that way, or I could change the way I think now. That's the reason why I take the time like this to do these type of podcasts or my own podcasts or whatever.
Would you like to promote your podcast and tell people where to find your dojo?
Well, my dojo definitely is right here in East Islip. It's 36 Hawthorne Avenue in East Islip, New York. The website is www.lininja.com. My podcasts are more business-related podcasts. One is called School Owner Talk. and the other one is called Marketing for Martial Arts School Owners. Both of them are on Facebook, but you have to be a school owner to listen, and you have to be a part of the group in order to listen to those podcasts. Because we share business information, and we don't want, the average person on there learning, techniques that we use to run our businesses and so on and so forth. But yeah, and I've written a few books. You could go on Amazon to check out my books. One book that I really love, it's a small, tiny little book. It's called 5 Gateways to Happiness. And I think that's a pretty cool book and it doesn't mean whether you're happy or sad. It's just a good book to change your perspective on life and enhance your life and happiness. And then the other ones are all on martial arts.
Awesome. Shihan Allie, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming
My
on the show.
pleasure. I appreciate you guys very much. And thanks for listening, everybody.